Hello, welcome back to another little video for our ethics class. Today's video focuses on the first meditation by Descartes. We're going to be kind of working our way through it very carefully. Hopefully, at this point, you at least know that his project for himself here is he suspects that he holds many opinions that he thinks could be false, that he doesn't know for sure that they are true, and he's going to work through them. He says he really wants to find something that is certain. And so the first thing I want to point out to you is that this is an act of moral courage, right? He is holding out what he thinks is true in a way that allows a counter argument to be made that could destroy those truths, right? And in fact, when there isn't a counter argument that's obvious, he really goes out of his way to invent a very strong counter argument, the big scary counter argument called the evil genius, which we'll get to in just a minute. But yes, I just want you to first of all recognize that Descartes starts out and shows us some real moral courage here, and what we were trying to illustrate with Mill, this idea of holding an opinion that you believe to be true, but holding it in such a way that you're allowing it to be challenged, right? That's how we show respect for the truth. That's what it means to be a philosopher. So what metaphor does Descartes use to talk about the way his opinions work, and really all of our opinions work? Does anybody know? Think about it. Let's take a look. Page 59, he says, "Several years have now passed," this is the very beginning of the reading, "since I first realized how numerous were the false opinions that in my youth I had taken to be true, and thus how doubtful were all those that I had subsequently built upon them. And thus I realized that once in my life I had to raze, R-A-Z-E, everything to the ground and begin again from the original foundations if I wanted to establish anything firm and lasting in the sciences." So the language being used here is metaphorical, yeah? He's talking about opinions that are built upon other opinions. And he's talking about needing to raise those opinions to the ground. If you needed to, you maybe looked up the word raise, which means to demolish, right? We're not talking about raising up. That's R-A-I-S-I-N-G. But raising is R-A-Z-E, means to demolish, to flatten, to bring it all down. And then he speaks about wanting to build a more secure foundation that is firmer, right? So this is what he's up to, is he's thinking about this structure of opinions that he's built over the course of a long, thoughtful life. And he's saying that the opinions in his life are much like a tower, and there are some opinions that are built upon other opinions, and he wants to make sure that the tower of all that he holds to be true is standing on firm and steady ground. It's a pretty good objective, right? It's a pretty good goal. He's taking it upon himself to figure that out. So we have our little, ooh, my tower is really leaning there, isn't it? Well, some people's towers lean, I suppose. So first of all, is he looking to prove that every opinion in this tower is false? Is he going to take one opinion at a time and take a look at it and open it up for debate and figure out if this one, oh, yeah, this one has to go. Okay, what about this one? Yeah, this one has to go too. No, he's not going to do that, right? Let's look at page 59 again, the last paragraph on that page. "Yet to bring this about, I will not need to show that all of my opinions are false, which is perhaps something I could never accomplish. But reason now persuades me that I should withhold my assent no less carefully from opinions that are not completely certain and indubitable than I would from those that are patently false. For this reason, it will suffice for the rejection of all these opinions if I find in each of them some reason for doubt." So first of all, he says, I can take one opinion and I don't have to prove that it's false to not want to think of it as certain. All I have to do is say there's something fishy about it. There's something that can't exactly be trusted about it. All right, so that's his first move here. Now, it's still not going to be that he just goes through each one. Here's another one. Oh, this one is uncertain. We'll get rid of that one. oh, and here's another one, we'll get rid of that one because that's uncertain. He's not going to go through them one at a time, right? No, let's go on to the next page. Continue reading where we were. Nor therefore need I survey each opinion individually, a task that would be endless, right? He's going to do something a little bit different. Rather, because undermining the foundations will cause whatever has been built upon them to crumble of its own accord, I will attack straight away those principles which supported everything I once believed. So instead of looking at each level of the tower, he's going to be instead looking at which opinions are the ones that are down here at the bottom. And can they be doubted? Again, he doesn't need to prove them false. He just needs to see, can they be doubted? That's the project here. It's about doubt. You might know a little bit about Descartes already. If you know anything about Descartes as a philosopher, you will know that skepticism goes hand in hand with his name. Skepticism being this practice of doubting what isn't absolutely certain. A real dependence on trying to tease out truth and certainty by way of doubting at the first get-go. That's what skepticism is about. All right, so what candidates does he propose for some of these foundational opinions? There are two. Did you catch them in your reading? There's two significantly different or significant foundational opinions that he thinks might be problematic. The first one begins on the next paragraph on page 60, and the second one begins in the middle of page 61, where he takes up something else. So maybe take a minute, look at your reading. What did you come up with? So the first foundational reason, the first foundational opinion that he is going to see if he can't, start to find reason to doubt is this idea, this opinion that the senses are trustworthy and that they convey to me my capacities for sense, right? My eyes, my nose, my mouth, my feeling of touch, my ears, that they convey to me facts, that they convey to me the truth. That's an opinion, he says, that we have. And he says, well, could this one be open to doubt? He notices right away in the next paragraph, surely whatever I had admitted until now is most true. I received either from the senses or through the senses. However, I have noticed that the senses are sometimes deceptive, as I'm sure you have too, right? The pencil in the glass of water is not in fact broken, but the senses tell us that it is. The moon is actually not the size of a quarter, but the senses tell us that it is. Things of that nature, right? And then he goes on, and here's where we should probably pause a little bit. He says this word perhaps, right? But perhaps, even though the senses do sometimes deceive us when it is a question of very small and distant things, still there are many other matters concerning which one simply cannot doubt, even though they are derived from the very same senses. So you saw it right here, right? Descartes, in his own words, just said there are matters from the senses that one simply cannot doubt. And that may have been confusing. But with the introduction of that word perhaps, he's showing us a counter argument. He's showing us what somebody might say in response to him. And I just point this out because all of the authors that we read, any author that you're going to read, if they're a good author, will take the time to do this. Will take the time to speak what they anticipate an argument against their thesis being. And so it's very easy and very maddening, actually, to find yourself quoting a line from Descartes. And Aristotle is very, very hard with this because he likes to talk about what other people have thought. For you to pick up a line from the text that is actually completely contradictory to the main thesis, right? Because this is completely contradictory. His thesis and what follows here is going to be that the senses are open to be doubted, that they don't convey to us the truth. So keep that in mind. Always try and read for the big picture. That's the gist that I'm trying to get you to understand. Read for the big picture and then let the details fill themselves in later. But if you miss that big picture by reading too slowly, by reading too painstakingly, the work that you do on the details doesn't matter because they're not linked together appropriately. Okay, so much for the perhaps. He goes on in the next couple paragraphs here to talk about insanity. He says, insanity, doesn't that seem to prove that reality is reality because the people who don't agree on what's real are insane? And so the things that I sense must be real because we have a name for these other people that don't seem to agree. But then he goes on to say, well, what about dreams? Who among you has never had a dream that you really were convinced in that moment was real? That you were sensing in that dream things that you really thought were truly real and yet were no more than figments of your imagination. He points to that, right? And then at the top of page 61, he starts to talk about painted images and how, somebody will say to Descartes, and again, this is the counter argument, painted images aren't real and we haven't sensed those and yet we think them up. And he says, well, but maybe the component parts, we might think the component parts are real. Like nobody has ever actually seen a unicorn. Nobody has actually ever seen a griffin. Monsters are a great example here. But we've seen the parts. Yeah, we've seen a horn on another animal. We've seen the eagle's head on another animal and the lion's tail on another animal. And so the component parts are there. And so this causes him to get to this place on page 61, speaking again sort of for the counter argument. This is the very middle of page 61. This class of things, and he's speaking here broadly of the things that the senses seem to do a good job of giving us. This class of things appears to include corporeal nature in general, together with its extension, the shape of extended things, their quantity, that is, their size and number, as well as the place where they exist and the time through which they endure, and the like. And he's saying, no, that those things, they seem certain, but they could just be dreams. And isn't that enough reason to suggest that that sense is doubtful? Okay, so that's the first kind of thread that works through these first couple of meditations, is about not being able to trust what the senses give us. All right, at this point, he shifts gears to another possible foundational thought in this tower, which would seem to be even deeper than senses. He says, thus it is not improper to conclude from this that physics and astronomy, medicine, and all the other disciplines that are dependent upon the consideration of composite things are in fact doubtful. Composite things meaning that these sciences, these studies, all take into account the things that were mentioned in the previous paragraph. Extension and shape and quantity and size and number, they are all built upon things that had to have been sensed in the first place. And so he's saying those are doubtful, but perhaps, okay, we're going to go on, perhaps arithmetic, geometry, and other such disciplines which treat of nothing but the simplest and most general things, and which are indifferent as to whether these things do or do not in fact exist, that is indifferent to whether or not the things that you sense are actually real. Perhaps these disciplines contain something certain and indubitable, something that is not able to be doubted. Addition, right? 2 + 3 equaling 5. You don't have to have 2 actual apples and 3 actual apples to think that through. His claim is trying to anticipate somebody saying, well, you certainly couldn't doubt thought of this nature, right? It seems to be pure thought. So on the one hand, we have senses that could be doubted, and he's given us some reasons to start to worry about that. And now he's saying, is it possible to doubt something that's more like pure thought, that doesn't have any direct reference, doesn't even care if the things it's talking about actually exist, such as arithmetic and geometry? Continuing, for whether I am awake or asleep, 2 + 3 make 5, and a square does not have more than 4 sides. It does not seem possible that such obvious truths should be subject to the suspicion of being false. But of course, he's going to go on to say that they actually are, Let's take a quick break here to talk about where the time in which Rene, our friend Rene, is living, right? So he wrote this work, the Meditations, in 1641. And previous to this work, he wrote another work called The Discourse on a Method in 1637, which contains much of the same thoughts done in a little bit of a different way. The main answer being the same, that what is certain is what he decides is certain in the Meditations is the same of what he finds to be certain in Discourse on a Method. Those works were written 1641 on the first for Meditations, 1637 for the Discourse on a Method. Galileo, you'll remember your good friend Galileo, who had the audacity to say, no, the heavens don't all circulate around the earth, but rather the earth goes around the sun. He was brought under house arrest in 1633, so only 4 years before these first ideas of Descartes came out in his Discourse on a Method in 1637. That's the environment in which he's living. There's a wonderful dedication letter to the Meditations, and I think one for the Discourse too, which I was going to sit down with and I kind of forgot, where he basically just butters up the people in the church, right? Trying to say, wouldn't it be great if we had a way to convince people that God is real? I think that we could provide more believers more fodder for their faith if they had more arguments to understand why faith is a good idea. Really, really, even before they've read the books, trying to get on their good side, right? He's very aware of this hotbed of religious persecution that's going on around him. And this, I should point out too, was also a struggle for Saint Teresa of Avila, who went on to be a saint, but it wasn't always so clear-cut. Some really interesting reflections about her work, where just how regularly she admits her own lack of intelligence, claims that she is not a writer, that she doesn't know anything, and insists instead that she's a vehicle for God's grace, right? And that, for instance, the structure of her main work, the interior castle, that she says that was given to her in a vision by God. Really just trying to step back from authorship, step back from suggesting that humans don't have to go through the church to get to God. It could have gone either way for her, right? But that's the environment in which he is working. So keep that in mind, because we are about to get to something kind of his bombshell, right? So page 63. My page 63. The bottom of page 63, he tells us who he thinks God is. He's really, really powerful. I'm sorry. No, not page 63. Page 61. Be that as it may, there is fixed in my mind a certain opinion of long standing, namely that there exists a God who is able to do anything, and by whom I, such as I am, have been created. And this whole paragraph is devoted to saying God is so powerful, right? And at the same time, putting in this possibility that God is so powerful that if he really is that powerful, perhaps he could be deceiving me of the truth of even whether 2 + 3 = 5. Immediately he backpedals a little bit on page 62, the next paragraph, and says, perhaps it's too scary to think of a God that is this powerful, that they could deceive us all the time. And then he says, but if it's true that God isn't that powerful, that means that I am a less perfect product of a less perfect creator, which probably means that I'm more likely to be deceived. And so either way, we should follow out this possibility that I am deceived about the truth of things which I held to be true. So really making an ironclad case for the possibility that what I think to be true, very foundationally true, not just the senses, but even the content of the things that I think as being self-evident, that those things could be doubted. He's making a possibility for that. So just evidence for that. Page 62, almost halfway down. But eventually I am forced to admit that there is nothing among the things I once believed to be true which it is not permissible to doubt, and not out of frivolity or lack of forethought, but for valid and considered reasons. Wow, right? He's really getting into it here. Let's go a little bit further. The next paragraph, he goes on to say that it is hard not to believe that his senses and the contents of his thoughts might be uncertain. So he proposes a thought project to make him really believe that they are. And this is where the evil genius starts to take center stage. So the bottom of page 62 going on to page 63. He says that he can, before going into this, I kind of understand how I could doubt my senses. I kind of understand how it's possible that I could doubt the content of those thoughts that seem pure and true without reference to anything sensible. But I need help with it, because it's really difficult for me to try and make myself meditate on that, to think it through very seriously. And so the help that he gives himself is this idea of this thought project of the evil genius. So last paragraph on page 62. Accordingly, I will suppose not a supremely good God, the source of truth, but rather an evil genius, supremely powerful and clever, who has directed his entire effort at deceiving me. I will regard the heavens, the air, the earth, colors, shapes, sounds, and all external things as nothing but the bedeviling hoaxes of my dreams, with which he lays snares for my credulity, for my ability to believe. I will regard myself as not having hands, or eyes, or flesh, or blood, or any senses, but as nevertheless falsely believing that I possess all these things. I will remain resolute and steadfast in this meditation, and even if it is not within my power to know anything true, it certainly is within my power to take care resolutely to withhold my assent to what is false, lest this deceiver, however powerful, however clever he may be, have any effect on me. And so what happens to the tower at that point? What happens to the power? The whole tower is gone. My dog is lying right here. She didn't like that very much. I'm sorry, Bugaboo. The whole tower is gone. That's what the evil genius thought project gets him to do. There is no more foundational thoughts that he has left, or so he thinks, right? So that's where we are at the end of this first meditation. Let's be very clear, and in case I haven't been already, does Descartes think that God is actually an evil genius? No, that would have been suicide, right? That would have brought the church down on him like nobody's business. He's been very careful about trying to make sure that we understand that this is simply a thought project. It's simply a meditation to engage in to help him better pursue the truth. Okay, so before we continue with the rest of the lesson, a word about reading for you by talking about this gigantic pile. Well, it could be a gigantic pile. The real gigantic pile would have been too scary. But do you see those? Those are Legos. They are the bane of my existence in this household. And there are a lot of them, right? Quite a few in this little pile over here. Kind of like when you open up a text and the text is full of a pile of words, right? You open up Descartes and whoo, it's like somebody just dumped Lego words all over the place. I once read that the human mind is not comfortable linking things together in groups more than 4. So 1 thing, 2 things, 3 things, 4 things. We're very comfortable at remembering lists of 3, maybe 4 items long. And past that, it gets to be a little bit taxing on us. And how many things are in that pile? More than 7. And if I showed you again the actual pile, there would be way more than 7. That's very cumbersome. When you look at the words in the in the readings that you've been assigned, very cumbersome. If I wanted to make sense of these Legos here on the floor, like the words that you read in a document, you might take up 1 at a time. What the heck is this one? 1 at a time. And that's tedious. That's laborious, right? And so the first thing when you approach a reading looking for that big picture is to try and gather them into larger containers, remembering that you only really have room for 4 containers before your brain is totally maxed out. So you might find some way of trying to sort out what you've read a little bit into some larger containers. Yeah? So over here I've got some special shapes, it looks like, that are kind of weird. We'll put those in one. What the heck is that? That's not a normal Lego. And then I've got a bunch of colored ones. We'll put those in this one. I know, you didn't pay good money to watch your professor sit on the floor and sort Legos. Okay, so now I've got my special shapes collection, and I've got my normal bricks collection. That's one way to do it. And you're trying to find what containers the author is using, right? Like, what is the natural organization? What is the big picture? Where are the big containers in what I'm reading, so that I can start to categorize all these details that are being thrown at me so quickly that I can't even grasp them, right? Find the big containers. After that, you start finding smaller containers, and if you can't find them, you can try and make them. Here are some smaller containers, yeah? And so I could go through and collect all of the red Legos into one, like this. And I could collect, all of the blue Legos into another. The point here being that the smaller pieces of a text, all those sentences and all those words become much easier to handle when you've got a handle on the shape that they are making up, right? Much more tidy when you've got things grouped into smaller groups that you can then become bigger groups, and it's just organized. This is the general shape of an outline, yeah? So that is one suggestion to you as you're working on reading comprehension, is that you can make an outline of what's being said where, just so that all of the words have a place to go. You don't have to, when you're picking up in your memory what meditation 1 was about, you don't have to pick up 8 bazillion words like a gigantic pile of Legos that you can't pick up. No, you can pick up, oh, right, that was the one that had those 2 foundational opinions and where he introduced the evil genius thought project. You can pick it up. Your brain can handle it. Your brain can hold it and evaluate it better. And then when you're going back through meditation 1, which I hope you'll do, you're able to see, oh, here's a stray thought. Here's a Lego that's not yet sorted. Where does it belong? How can I categorize it? But if you're reading in a way that that big picture is lost to you, you're reading very slowly, you're reading very painstakingly, you're looking up every word as you go, you're making comments in the margins as you go, that's going to kill you. Read for the big picture as fast as you can at first. Read to have a sense of the gist of it, all right? So one way to do it is to make an outline of what you read. Another way to do it, similarly, is to give each paragraph a title as you read, kind of summing up those natural containers that are the paragraphs. And then a third way, which I have for you, of grouping thoughts together is coming up in the next page. Problem synopsis, and then next time we'll be talking about the argument analysis. But while I've got you and we're talking about reading, just a forewarning about the Hegel reading that's coming up. It's incredibly dense. I think I mentioned elsewhere. There's 7 paragraphs of Hegel, of straight, unadulterated Hegel, and then about 20 pages of commentary by a fellow named Roger Williams. Just get through it. From one word to the last word, from the beginning to the end, just get through it. You will not understand very much of it, and that is okay. The point here is that I really want you to know what the deep end looks like. You could go through your entire college career without having a respect for the kinds of things that words can do. I want you to see what words can do, how complicated they can become, because they are showing nuanced, complicated thought. And it's very exciting. It's very interesting. But if you only ever read a textbook, you'll never know that. So don't lose heart. Don't panic. We're going to work through it together, much like we just did with Meditation 1. And hopefully you'll be better for it. I do think that you'll be better for it. So, Bugaboo, you want to say hi? Come here. Come here and say hi. Here's a good dog. Here. There's Bugaboo. She's cranky because she hasn't had a walk yet. So we're going to go have a walk, and you guys have fun with Descartes. See you next time. Oh, dog. Oh my goodness.